COVID-19 pandemic has compelled companies and organizations to rethink the very nature of work. For more on new employment trends, I have with me the team from BCG India and Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. We have Mr. Raja Augustin Raj, Principal BCG India. We also have Mr. Vikas Jain, Partner Tech BCG India. Rahil Rangwala, Director India Programs at Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and Seema Bansal, Director Social Impact Practice at BCG India. All authors of the report, thank you so much for joining us. The gig economy is the report they wrote. The gig economy in India has the potential to serve up to 90 million jobs and add 1.25% to India's GDP. Now, for our viewers to understand, gig workers are independent contractual workers, online platform workers, also on-call workers and part-time workers. So first, let's begin by asking Mr. Raja Augustin Raj, could you begin by by explaining to our viewers just how have you reached the conclusions of your report of 90 million jobs in the informal sector in about 8 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, right? And, it serves for us to, just take a step back, right? When we all think of the gig economy, right, we usually anchor to the usual suspects, right? We usually think of cab hailing, we usually think of food delivery and so on and so forth, right? And what we really wanted to do was take a step back and really expand the canvas of this to say, what are all the gig economy opportunities that exist across all sectors of the economy? And so literally we went through sector by sector in each part of the non-farm economy in India. We looked at, construction, manufacturing, retail, transportation, logistics, education, and so forth. And we actually broke out the individual job categories within each of those sectors. And then we took each of those job categories and said, what is the propensity of these jobs to potentially be serviced via the gig economy? What are the parameters that would drive adoption? What are the industry practices that would either aid in its migration to gig or impede its migration to gig? And it's on the basis of that we've actually built up this number of 90 million. So it's actually quite a detailed sort of bottom-up estimate that has gone sector by sector and takes into account not just the industry dynamics, but a ton of first-person primary interviews from the field in terms of how the industry is moving and the trends that are sort of shaping it.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Vikas, that is as far as the understanding is concerned. But what about the impact of the increased formalization of our gig economy? What do you have to say about the real impact this may have?
The ability to formalize the economy and employment has such a massive opportunity for us. I mean, think about the labor that sits on the chalk, waiting for a contractor to come and ask who is available to work, takes them on the open tractor. They work for a day, get paid and gone. That is not even traced anywhere. If some portion of that is starting to be more formalized, the ability of those individuals to actually invest in better tools, thereby improving their livelihoods, their ability to create a track record of employment, thereby creating a credit history. Mm-hmm. And that leads to a set of positive upside. That the opportunity is just phenomenal.
So a massive opportunity there, but Mr. Raja, that's for sure. But when do you see 90 million jobs in actuality for the informal sector? Remember, there have been various pain points, and of course, people are now concerned about job creation in this country.
I think in the near term, if you think about the next, 1, 2, 3 year horizon, where we really see the biggest sort of opportunities are in those skilled trades and in some of those, some of those scarce supply resources, right? Where when you talk to small contractors, they say that, finishers, for example, for all their construction projects are incredibly hard to find. If you talk to, pipeline sort of contractors, they tell you that welders, for example, are incredibly hard to find, and so on and so forth, right? So those types of skilled trades which are in short supply, even in this environment, we see as the most near-term unlock. And then, of course, there is a more medium-term unlock that comes from a whole set of job categories, which, we see as sitting in what we call the latent sort of demand in households and MSMEs and shared services and the like. So that's how we see this playing out over the next near term as well as in the long term.
All right. And, Mr. Vikas, when do you see these awareness and this flexibility across platforms?
We believe there is an ecosystem that needs to come about, which will be including skilling, which has to include data skill registry. It also includes things like, when you register on one platform, Are you getting stuck with them? Are you flexible to move across platforms? Do you need to carry a credential certificate that you are a certified mason, you're a certified welder? What does that certification mean? What is the currency of that certification? And if you look at the demand side, is the employer defining the jobs by a set of certification? Today, you ask for a carpenter, you get a carpenter. Is there a way to say that this carpenter has level A, B, C or level 1, 2, 3 of certification? What does that mean? What does that mean to his livelihood? All of this has to gradually come about.
Right, an interesting example there of a carpenter. I'd also like to bring in Rahil Rangwala now, Director India Programs, Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. Rahil, do you believe tech platforms are really helping formalize this gig economy?
85% of India is informal workers. So they don't look for jobs, they look for work. Everybody, the bulk of India is people who are paid by task. Whether it's the maid who comes in and works for lunch in your house and then she does a task in someone else's house, or one person who probably delivers newspapers and then washes your car. These are just tasks that they do that they get paid for. And what's happened is the technology platforms have helped formalize this incredibly informal economy. And this transition to formalization, I think the first step is enumeration. And I want to highlight that because COVID, the pandemic, kind of highlighted the challenges of not being able to identify those that were impacted the most through this pandemic. When we went into this lockdown, overnight policymakers and everybody, we weren't able to identify and reach out to the segments that needed help most. This first step of organizing an enumeration, whether you want to talk about, policies directed towards subsidies or social security nets, the first step is enumeration. So what I'm most excited about is in this shift, we're now having a stronger and greater ability to identify and enumerate and use data to make better decisions about the lives of this informal workforce. I would say that's one big opportunity.
All right, so the key being there, using data to make more informed decisions. Seema, your report also highlights 87% of the workforce will perhaps now permanently want to work from home. Does this then change the equation between the employer and the employees?
The shift towards work from home is going to come, and we all know this will come faster than what we had imagined. Yeah, just because of the situation that we're in. Whether it is a few years, or a little bit longer than that, it is just very difficult to say. In terms of the equation between the employer and employee, I'm not sure if the power balance itself will necessarily will change, but I think the fundamental relationship itself changes.
All right, Rahil, but unemployment in urban India in March, as per reports, has been over 7%. In rural India, it has been over 6%. So do you see the formalization of the informal economy shrinking this urban and rural divide?
I take a gender lens to this. As you know, women's labor force participation rates now is at historical lows. I think it's below 20%. And as the report suggests, and based on our research, women have more opportunity in the gig economy, primarily because of the flexibility that women typically are looking for in their work. And remote work is one big opportunity over there. And one thing that we're seeing is sort of the digital opportunities coming for women. And I hope that the gig economy can shrink that. So how do we bring women back into the workforce is a very, very important thing if we want to grow as an economy and if we want to hit the targets that our government has set for us. Right? We will not, there's no way we will be a world leader with a really low women's labor force participation rate. And I think the gig economy can solve for that.
All right. Lastly, Seema, there is a digital divide for those who are not digitally literate. Just how do you think all of this and how can they access these platforms that your team members and all of you have been talking about in your report?
Firstly, completely resonate with you about the digital divide. We saw this during COVID and all of our education work. The funnel on India's telecom penetration, the number of people who have phones, smartphones, data connections, and then know how to use them, that funnel just narrows very, very quickly. My belief on this is that the answer lies, in what is now starting to get called the digital world. And therein the government will also need to play a very strong role. So if we only think about digital platforms, will this get enabled, and will the person on the street who isn't digitally literate or digitally connected, will they get an opportunity? Unlikely. But when you start thinking about combining, the erstwhile idea of employment exchanges, employment platforms, infrastructure that the government potentially has in terms of, let's say schools or polytechnics or ITIs or labor desks, which could double up at places where someone could walk in and understand what the opportunity is, and the connections could be made in a combination of physical and digital world. I think that is where the potential lies, which actually then makes the need for this to become a combined effort between public enterprises and private enterprises even that much more.
All right. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us for this interaction.